The time right now is 3:39, and I wonder if you know what Posh Spice, Michael Jackson, and Marilyn Monroe have in common with infamous Winnipeggers. We might be surprised to hear what award-winning author and poet Maurice Mierau has to say about it. Tomorrow he's launching his latest work, a collection of poems called Autobiographical Fictions. He's also a poet who is excited to share the joys of the craft, and he's with me in studio right now. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So thank you for that tough title there. Well, it may be only tough for me, but before we get into your latest book, though, I want to ask you this. If you were to talk to a group of people who had never read poetry or hadn't been exposed to it, what would you say to them to open their eyes and ears to it, to get them at least intrigued?
Well, I think it's the greatest form of literature. It's usually the first one we're attracted to when we're kids. We can all remember Dr. Seuss.
Oh, yeah.
We all remember song lyrics for some reason, even as grown-ups. But, I think the difficulty comes that in terms of contemporary poets, people like me have turned our back on the audience a little bit in terms of abandoning rhyme and meter. And I think those, there's centuries of tradition, and modern poetry also gives us permission to do anything. And it would behoove people like me to compromise a little bit. So, the last line of my book is the snow was wrong, and most of what I know. And it's a 4-beat line, and it's got a pure rhyme in it, and there's lots of stuff like that in the book, because I think you got to play to the ear as well as the eye.
That's a wonderful line, by the way. Let's talk about the book, Autobiographical Fictions. Much smoother that time. Describe your inspiration for this.
Well, I think the book is really about delusion, which sounds like a negative thing, and in some ways it is. But all of us, in order to exist and to be reasonably happy, need to believe some things that are not true. And so, for example, there's a poem about Bob Marley. And in his case, believing things that weren't true probably led to him dying sooner than he might have otherwise in terms of seeking cancer treatment. But there's nothing condescending about that poem because it keeps coming back to the speaker, me, saying that there's things I believe that aren't true as well. And so, that's really the theme of the whole book, and the contradiction in the title, because autobiography is supposed to be true and fiction is supposed to be made up.
The funny thing about that, though, is autobiography itself, how often is it completely true, right? Because even we remember our past jumbled up in ways and slightly warped, right?
Of course. I just came off a weekend of promoting my memoir, Detachment, at IFOA in Toronto, and that was wonderful. But you're absolutely right. Memory is a construction, and so everybody who's worked hard at writing in the form of memoir knows very well that there are people who won't see things the same way that you did.
Right. Well, I would love to hear one of your poems. Can you read one for us?
Absolutely. I'll read the last poem in the book, the one I quoted the line from. It's called Leaving, and it's for my son Jeremy. Last night I left you in a field of snow with a D minor wind blowing up stage left. The howling wind was angry. It said no. Not even London drugs stayed open. I dreamed of pigs squealing, and in the night, sirens sang far from the industrial field. Last night I packed. The clock was slow, and my mind was just on leaving. You slept and did not know how soon I'd leave you in the open snow. I dreamed of flying like a crow that night, and you looked pixel-dense, unreal. You cried, and someone saw. They knew your loneliness in the locked car I'd left for an errand, left the window open. That hot day they pulled down Lennon in daylight on TV, that day or night of guilty knowledge, and you awoke. It was no time to leave or dream of CNN and Lennon's rope. It was just a parking lot, I know, another barren field, not a place to grieve. The snow was wrong, and most of what I know.
I understand some of the poems are inspired or drawn from incidents in Winnipeg, like the killing of Geraldine Beardy in a grocery store back in 2010. Can you tell me about that?
Sure. one of the things I've tried to do very deliberately is have poems, as you mentioned, that are about celebrities, people like Posh Spice that we've all heard of, juxtaposed with people who show up in the local news that we don't think of in the same way at all. And, celebrities are like gods for us. We enjoy watching them die. But when an ordinary person dies, we say it's a tragedy on the news, and it is. So I think one of the jobs of people like me, poets, is to remind us that the lives of ordinary people are absolutely important, and in some ways, the centrality of what goes on right around us is a bigger thing than what happens to Victoria Beckham.
What do you want readers to come away with after reading Autobiographical Fictions?
Well, I hope that I get in their ears and that they remember some of my lines. I think that's the ultimate ambition of any poet is to write things that people remember. And in terms of theme, I think it would be good for all of us to remember some of the things we believe that are not entirely true, but help us keep going.
I need to ask you this before I let you go, because I often think this when we hear a poet on the show, or even a slam poet on the show as well. Someone listening, there's a younger person listening who is just inspired by what you read there and feels this is what I want to get into. What's your best advice to them? Because there's no plotted path to becoming a professional poet out there. What's your advice for those young people listening right now?
They should read as much poetry as they possibly can, and they should study. They should learn other languages, and memorize poems, and devote yourself to writing, because the devotion is what shows up in the craft, and you have to be able to motivate yourself and inspire yourself in the end, because most people after they're 25, if they're going to keep writing, it has to come from inside them.
Right. Really great to meet you, Maurice.
Good to meet you. Thank you.
Maurice Mierau is launching Autobiographical Fictions tomorrow at McNally Robinson. Now it starts at 7 o'clock, the event. We could give you a sort of head start here. We could get a book into your hands. We have a copy of Autobiographical Fictions to give away. If you want it, you need to call us. If you're calling from Winnipeg, you call 204-780-0893. If you're calling from out of town, sorry, we'll make you hit one extra digit, 1-800-268-5483. We're going to give this book away to caller number 12.